In this tutorial, we will take a look at the last two tabs on the National Vendor Quote Sheet, Reconciliation and Check Payments. These two tabs go hand in hand, helping with receipt reconciliation, deferred ACV payments, and we will start with the Reconciliation tab. You will notice that a lot of the columns in the Reconciliation tab have been carried over from the detailed inventory, including line item, quantity, replacement description, coverage type, the national vendor quote all the way through total RCV with sales tax, and most importantly, the recoverable depreciation with line limits applied that is still available to the insured, and the actual cash value with line limits applied that has been paid to the insured. The remaining columns are what will be used to determine what to pay the insured when they turn in receipts. Up at the top, you will see the running count of exposure to recoverable depreciation, and as we add receipts, that number will decrease. These two highlighted in yellow columns will also show what we've paid the insured as we add receipts, so these numbers will be going up as this number goes down. We finally have a box here that will help us keep track of any kind of limits and make sure that we don't pay over limits on certain categories of items. So let's get into receipt reconciliation by doing an example. The first thing I will point out is item number 1, which is a Samsung television. You will notice as we go across that this item has 0 quantity remaining and the status is complete. In this sample, this item was already replaced by National Vendor through our fulfillment program and approved by the adjuster. Therefore, when it comes to receipt reconciliation, it is not a consideration. No quantity is remaining and the status is complete. Any item that is replaced by National Vendor will have 0 quantity to be considered. But we move on to item number 2, which is 2 Samsung sound bars. And we're going to use an example as if the insured replaced just one of the two. So starting in the light blue highlighted columns is where you're going to do your work to figure out exactly what to pay the insured. We start with quantity replaced, which in this case we're going to put 1. And then the next column is called actual replacement cost paid. And this is where you're going to take a look at the receipt, include any applicable sales tax and shipping, freight, whatever you determine to be the amount the insured paid for the item, and you'll enter it here. Let's say the insured paid $480 for this single soundbar. Immediately what will come up is the recoverable depreciation that would be owed to the insured based on the amount they paid. You'll notice in this case that the recoverable depreciation for 2 was $97.54, and that we are paying exactly half of that because the insured only paid 1 and paid more than the original quote. One of the great features of this reconciliation tab is the ability then to override. Let's say you want to pay the insured more, you feel that they, for whatever special circumstance, you want to pay them $50 or $60 or whatever they spent over the original quote. You can do that by simply putting the number you want to pay the insured. If it's 65, you put it right in there, and this is the column which is actually what you're going to pay to the insured. Now, in most cases, you're going to pay just right up to what you're supposed to pay based on the quote. So let's put $48.77 in for this example, as we'll match the maximum depreciation allowed. Let's add one more item. So in this group, let's say that the insured also sent in a receipt for this Milwaukee Sawzall. We'll say that they spent $169, and you'll notice that when the moment we enter 1 as a quantity, there's now 0 remaining. We'll put in the $169, and again, it's over the quote that National Vendor originally supplied, so the max recoverable depreciation is $34.96, which then moves into the recommended payout column. If you agree with that, you simply add $34.96 to the actual column, and you are ready to cut your first check. And as we noticed earlier on, or it was brought up, this number has gone down as we have start paying the insured, and this number is what we are paying the insured. We make our payments through the check payment tab, which we will look at now. Now, this check payment tab is where we're going to record all the checks we make to insureds for receipts. And it was a very handy tool when the insured turns in multiple receipts at multiple times. The very first check that we issue is going to be the easiest because you're going to know exactly what to pay based on what's right in here. 8373 is to the insured. We record a check number, let's say 1001. You'll notice that when there is an outstanding balance, there's going to be an error message in red here, basically saying that the numbers are not in balance right now, but the moment you put the right number in the check column, this will disappear, and we now have a running total of checks paid. We've paid $83.73 on check 1001, and we are running in balance. So we will go back to the reconciliation tab, and I will show you two columns that are, in all honesty, optional, but are good for keeping organized. First is you can record the check number based on the item. So these two items that we just paid for, we'll record check number 1001. In this case, we can look at the fact that there are no more items ready to be replaced on this line. We replaced the only item, so we can change it from open to complete, and we know that this line is done. Now, remember, on this line, we replaced one of two, so we can change it from open to pending, which means that they can still turn in a receipt for that second soundbar. So let's fast forward a couple weeks. The insured turns in a couple more receipts. We go back to our inventory, we go back to our reconciliation tab, and let's take this Trek mountain bike, and let's say the insured has replaced this mountain bike for $499. We got a receipt, he went and picked it up, it was $499. Again, we'd use the same formatting. We will put quantity 1 replaced, we will put the whole $499 in there, and you'll notice, once again, the recommended payout to the insured is the full recoverable depreciation. If the insured happened to pay less than the full replacement cost national vendor quota, let's say they only paid $480 and national vendor had quoted $486, then the amount owed to the insured would be reduced to whatever would balance out with what the insured paid. In this case, let's say $18.13. So you would always need to make sure that you put something into the column that is actual paid to the insured, because that is what figures the amounts being paid. This is the recommendation. What's important is that you put in what you're going to pay the insured, and in most cases it should be the recommend payment. The other thing we want to look at in this second receipt, let's say the insured has now turned in a second receipt for a second soundbar because we owe them one more. How do we account for that? Well, the first thing is very easy. We're now going to make the quantity to replace 2. And this is where you're going to need to get your calculator out, because you're going to have to take the 480, the original receipt said, and add the second receipt. And we'll make this easy and say that the insured turned in a receipt for another $480. So those two combined become $960, and that's how much they paid for the two items. You'll notice there are now 0 quantity remaining, but the recommended payout to the insured matches the recoverable depreciation of $97.54, and so we're going to want to go ahead and change this to the $97.54 as well. And again, you'll notice that the recoverable amount of depreciation that is still available is going down, the payout to the insured is going up. So now we have these two items, the bike and the second item of the sound bars, and we want to cut another check. We'll go to our check payment tab, and you'll notice that again, we're now out of balance. There's this error message again. How do we figure out what to pay the insured based on the second set of receipts? It's a very simple process. We're going to use this column here by simply entering the current running total, which is down at the bottom, of all the checks paid previous. In that case, we paid $83.73 already. So if we enter $83.73, it will show that we owe the insured $66.90 on this second check. You enter that amount in here, and you'll notice the error is gone because we are back in balance. Let's say this is check 1002, and we are ready to close these two items out as well. We will go back to the reconciliation tab, and what we're going to do is take into account this second sound bar. We are going to move this to complete, And you'll notice what I did here is I have now entered check 1001 and put a slash and put check that 1002. This allows us to know that we've entered two separate checks to cover the 9754. We then go down to the Trek bike. We put in our check 1002. We will change this from open to complete, and we are done with this check. We have issued two checks to the insured in the amount of $150.63, and we have $77.23 remaining of recoverable depreciation. That's a look at these two tabs. Of course, your national vendor representative will have as much information as you need. If you need some tutorials or more help on these tabs, please contact National Vendor. We'd be more than happy to help you. But this should be a way to simply track receipt reconciliation within the National Vendor Quote Sheet.